The janitor, who mopped floors at the Pentagon for 15 years, collapsed from a heart attack during his morning shift. Security rushed him to Walter Reed Hospital, thinking they were saving just another employee. But hidden beneath the surface of this ordinary man was a truth so extraordinary that it would soon have the President of the United States personally racing through the halls of Walter Reed. The Pentagon at 0500 hours was a fortress of shadows and whispered secrets. Thomas Mitchell's footsteps echoed through corridors where decisions that shaped the world were made daily, yet he remained invisible, a ghost in gray coveralls who had perfected the art of being overlooked. At 73, his weathered hands pushed the same cleaning cart through the same routes he'd walked for 15 years, but today felt different. Today, the weight of 52 years of buried secrets pressed against his chest like a physical force. Room 2 times 10 to the power of 924 had become his sanctuary, a small office overlooking the Potomac where he could watch the sunrise while emptying trash bins filled with documents that could topple governments. The morning light filtered through bulletproof glass as Thomas bent to retrieve a crumpled memo about Chinese naval movements in the South China Sea. The irony wasn't lost on him. He fought the Chinese in jungles they didn't know he'd ever seen, and here he was, decades later, cleaning up intelligence reports about the same enemy. The pain hit him like a sniper's bullet. Sudden, precise, devastating. Thomas Mitchell, who had survived torture in a bamboo cage, who had walked through minefields in the dark, who had killed men with his bare hands to protect American secrets, was dying on the cold Pentagon floor at 0547 on a Tuesday morning in October. His cleaning cart crashed into the wall, industrial bleach spilling across classified documents. The mop handle clattered like gunfire in the empty corridor. Thomas clawed at his chest, his vision tunneling as his heart, the same heart that had beaten steadily through 3 firefights in one night, began to fail him. Security Officer Marcus Webb heard the crash from 2 corridors away. A former Force Recon Marine with tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Webb moved with practiced silence toward the disturbance. What he found made his blood run cold. An elderly man convulsing on the floor, his face gray as ash, clutching his chest in the universal gesture of cardiac arrest. Webb's training kicked in immediately. He dropped to his knees, checking for a pulse he couldn't find, and began CPR on a chest that felt surprisingly solid beneath the worn coveralls. As he pressed compressions, he noticed details that bothered him, scars visible at the man's collar that looked like bullet wounds, forearms corded with muscle that belonged to someone who'd done more than push him up. "Come on, old-timer," Webb muttered between compressions. "Whatever you've been through, don't let it end here." The Pentagon's emergency medical team arrived within 3 minutes, their equipment cart squeaking down the polished corridor. As they worked to stabilize Thomas, loading him onto a stretcher with military precision, his wallet slipped from his back pocket and scattered its contents across the floor. Webb gathered the items methodically, a faded DC driver's license showing an address in Southeast that had been demolished years ago, a Metro card with exactly 12 rides left, a Social Security card worn soft at the edges, and something that made Webb's breath catch in his throat. A small, worn card that read Congressional Medal of Honor Society, lifetime member. Below that, in smaller print, Thomas J. Mitchell, Vietnam Service, awarded posthumously 1971. Webb stared at the card for a long moment, his mind racing. Posthumously meant the man was supposed to be dead. But here he was, or had been until 3 minutes ago, mopping floors in the Pentagon under a name that belonged to a dead hero. Webb slipped the card back into the wallet and made a decision that would change everything. He was going to make some calls. At Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, Dr. Sarah Chen was beginning what she expected to be a routine shift in the cardiac intensive care unit. 20 years of emergency medicine had taught her to read the subtle signs that separated the savable from the lost, and the man being wheeled in from the Pentagon was sending mixed signals her way. "What do we know?" Dr. Chen asked as the trauma team transferred their patient to her unit. 73-year-old male, massive MI at the Pentagon, reported the EMT. Down for approximately 4 minutes before CPR was initiated. 2 additional cardiac events en route. He's been coding and coming back like he's fighting something. Dr. Chin looked at the monitor. Thomas Mitchell's vitals were all over the place, but there was something stubborn about them, as if his body was refusing to surrender. She'd seen it before in combat veterans, a physiological determination that couldn't be explained by medical science. As her team worked to stabilize their patient, Dr. Chin noticed details that raised questions. Despite his age and the severity of his condition, Thomas Mitchell had the muscle tone of someone who'd maintained military fitness standards. His hands, visible beneath the forelines, were calloused in patterns she recognized from treating special operations personnel. And across his visible skin was a roadmap of scars that told a story of violence most people couldn't imagine. "Get me a full workup," Dr. Chin ordered. "Blood chemistry, toxicology, and add a trauma history profile. This man has seen combat." Meanwhile, back at the Pentagon, Sergeant First Class Patricia Reeves was handling what should have been routine paperwork. Pentagon protocol required notification of employee medical emergencies through the Department of Defense Personnel Database, a simple input designed to track security clearances and ensure classified information remained protected. Reeves typed Thomas Mitchell into the system, expecting to see a basic janitorial staff file with maybe 15 years of unremarkable service. Instead, her computer screen flashed red with a message that made her stomach drop. Classification level, cosmic, presidential authorization required, do not proceed. The database locked immediately, denying her access to any further information. Within 30 seconds, her secure phone was ringing. "Sergeant Reeves, this is Colonel James Hartford from Defense Intelligence. You just attempted to access a file that's above your clearance level. Do not discuss this with anyone. Do not leave your desk. Do not log off your computer. Someone will be with you in exactly 7 minutes. 3 floors below, in a section of the Pentagon that didn't appear on any public tours, Colonel Hartford was staring at a computer screen that showed him a file he'd never expected to see activated. According to the database, Staff Sergeant Thomas Mitchell had been declared killed in action on April 15, 1971, during Operation Silent Thunder, a classified mission in Laos that officially never happened. The file contained details that made Hartford's blood run cold. Thomas Mitchell hadn't just been a soldier, he'd been the point man for one of the most dangerous special operations missions of the Vietnam War. His team had been tasked with infiltrating a North Vietnamese facility where captured American nuclear technology was being analyzed by Chinese scientists. The mission was a success, but at a devastating cost. 11 men had died, ensuring that American nuclear secrets didn't fall into enemy hands. According to the official record, Thomas Mitchell had died with them. His Medal of Honor had been awarded posthumously to his sister. There was even a grave in Arlington National Cemetery with his name on it. But the real Thomas Mitchell had been captured during the extraction. For 18 months, he'd endured torture designed to break him and force him to reveal details about American nuclear capabilities. He'd given them nothing but his name, rank, and serial number, even when they'd broken most of his bones and burned patterns into his skin with heated metal. When he'd finally escaped, stealing a North Vietnamese patrol boat and navigating 200 miles of hostile coastline to reach American forces, the operation had been so classified that bringing him back officially would have compromised national security. So they'd given him a choice: remain officially dead and live quietly on a government pension, or return to his identity and spend the rest of his life in protective custody. Thomas Mitchell had chosen to disappear. Hartford picked up a secure phone that connected directly to the Pentagon's National Military Command Center. "This is Hartford. I need an immediate Priority 1 connection to the White House Situation Room. Code word, Silent Thunder." At Walter Reed, Dr. Chin was fighting the battle of her career. Thomas Mitchell had flatlined twice more since arriving, and each time her team had managed to bring him back from a death that seemed determined to claim him. During the third code blue, as she pressed defibrillator paddles to his chest, she got her first clear look at the extent of his scars. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about her patient. His torso was a canvas of old violence, bullet entry and exit wounds, shrapnel scars, what looked like burn marks in deliberate patterns, and surgical scars from procedures that weren't in any medical database she could access. "Doctor," called Nurse Rodriguez, her voice tight with confusion, "his blood work is back. You need to see this." Dr. Chin studied the results and felt the hair on her neck stand up. Thomas Mitchell's blood contained traces of compounds that hadn't been manufactured since the early 1970s, experimental military stimulants designed to enhance performance and pain tolerance during extended combat operations. Drugs that were supposed to have been destroyed decades ago when their long-term effects proved too dangerous. "Run the tests again," Dr. Chin ordered, "and get me a complete chemical profile. I want to know everything that's in his system." But before the tests could be completed, her unit was invaded by men in dark suits who identified themselves only as federal agents and began establishing a security perimeter around Thomas Mitchell's room. Agent Reynolds, the lead operative, approached Dr. Chun with the kind of authority that brooked no argument. "Doctor, this patient is now under federal protection. No one enters or leaves this room without my authorization. No test results are to be shared with anyone outside your immediate team. Is that understood?" "I need to understand what I'm dealing with," Dr. Chin protested. "This man's medical history." "His medical history is classified at the highest levels of government," Reynolds interrupted. "What you need to understand is that you're treating a national hero whose existence was erased to protect American lives. In approximately 1 hour, you're going to have visitors who will explain everything." In the Oval Office, President Donald Trump was reviewing intelligence briefings when his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, entered carrying a red folder that indicated classified material at the highest levels. "Mr. President, we have a situation that requires your immediate personal attention," Meadows said, placing the folder on Trump's desk. "It involves a man named Thomas Mitchell." Trump looked up from his briefing papers. "Never heard of him." "Sir, according to this file, Thomas Mitchell is directly responsible for preventing Chinese acquisition of American nuclear technology in 1971. He spent 18 months being tortured by the North Vietnamese and never revealed a single classified detail. He's been living under an assumed identity for 52 years because his real existence was classified." Meadows opened the folder to reveal photographs from Operation Silent Thunder, grainy black and white images of a young soldier leading a team through jungle terrain that officially didn't exist. The mission reports detailed a surgical strike against a heavily fortified North Vietnamese facility where American nuclear technology captured during the Pueblo incident was being analyzed by Chinese scientists. "The operation was successful," Meadows continued. "The facility was destroyed, the technology was recovered, and the Chinese scientists were eliminated. But the cost was 11 American lives, including, officially, Thomas Mitchell." Trump studied the photographs, seeing in the young soldier's face the same determination he'd observed in modern special operations personnel. "Where is he now?" "Walter Reed, sir. Massive heart attack this morning. The doctors aren't optimistic about his chances." Trump stood immediately, his decision made without hesitation. "Get Marine One ready. Cancel my afternoon appointments. If this man is dying, he's going to die knowing his country remembers what he did. Sir, with respect, perhaps a phone call would be more appropriate." "Mark," Trump interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "This man volunteered for a suicide mission to protect American nuclear secrets. He survived torture that would have broken most people, escaped from enemy territory, and then agreed to disappear forever to protect national security. If he's dying, the least I can do is look him in the eye and tell him his sacrifice mattered." 25 minutes later, Marine One lifted off from the South Lawn, carrying the President of the United States on a mission that would never appear in any official schedule. At Walter Reed, the arrival of the presidential entourage transformed the cardiac wing into a secure facility. Secret Service agents appeared as if materializing from the walls, conducting sweeps and establishing protective perimeters. Dr. Chin found herself briefed by agents who spoke in careful euphemisms about national security considerations and classified medical situations. "Dr. Chun," Agent Reynolds explained, "the President is coming to visit Mr. Mitchell. I need you to understand that everything you see and hear during this visit is classified at the highest levels. You've been granted temporary security clearance, but that comes with responsibilities that extend far beyond this hospital." When President Trump arrived at 1,347 hours, he was accompanied by Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and a man Dr. Chun didn't recognize but who carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. Trump approached the bed where Thomas Mitchell lay, surrounded by the technology keeping him alive. For a long moment, the president simply stood in silence, studying the face of a man who had sacrificed everything for his country and asked for nothing in return. "Is he conscious?" Trump asked quietly. "He's sedated, but his brain activity suggests he can hear and process information," Dr. Chen replied. Trump moved closer to the bed, his voice taking on a tone Dr. Chen had never heard from him, quiet, respectful, almost reverent. "Thomas, this is Donald Trump. I'm the President of the United States, and I'm here because I know who you really are." The cardiac monitors showed an immediate spike in Thomas's heart rate. "I know about Operation Silent Thunder," Trump continued. "I know what you did in Laos. I know about the 18 months you spent in that cage, and I know about the choice you made to disappear rather than compromise your mission. Your country has remembered, Thomas. We've never forgotten." Secretary Esper stepped forward and placed a leather folder on the bedside table. "Mr. President, these are the declassified portions of Staff Sergeant Mitchell's service record. His actions in Laos prevented Chinese acquisition of American nuclear technology that could have changed the balance of the Cold War." Trump nodded, his attention never leaving Thomas's face. "I want you to know something, Thomas. Your Medal of Honor is going to be presented properly. Not posthumously to your sister, but to you in person, in the East Room of the White House. Because you earned it, and you deserve to receive it while you're alive to see it." Dr. Chin watched in amazement as the president spent the next hour talking to an unconscious patient about operations that had taken place before she was born. He spoke of jungles and firefights, of impossible missions and heroic sacrifices. He described a young soldier who had volunteered for certain death and somehow found a way to survive. But then something changed. The cardiac monitor began showing irregular patterns that Dr. Chun recognized immediately. "Mr. President," she interrupted urgently, "I need you to step back. He's going into VFib." The room erupted into controlled chaos as Dr. Chen's team fought to stabilize Thomas Mitchell once again. As they worked, Trump refused to leave, standing against the wall and watching as medical professionals battled to save a man whose existence had been erased from official records. During the resuscitation, something extraordinary happened. As Dr. Chin administered the electrical shock that restarted Thomas's heart, his eyes opened for the first time since his initial cardiac arrest. His gaze was unfocused initially, but it found Trump's face and locked onto it with an intensity that sent chills through everyone in the room. "Thomas," Trump said softly, "can you hear me?" The smallest of nods, barely perceptible but unmistakable. "You're safe now," Trump continued. "The mission is over. You can come home." Thomas Mitchell's lips moved, and Dr. Chun leaned close to hear the words that would haunt her for the rest of her career. "The package," he whispered, his voice like sandpaper. "Did the package make it home?" Trump looked confused, but Secretary Esper understood immediately. He leaned over the bed and spoke with quiet certainty. "The package made it home, Sergeant. The nuclear technology was recovered intact. The Chinese never got it. Your mission was successful." For the first time in 52 years, Thomas Mitchell smiled. But the conversation was far from over. As Thomas's strength returned, he began to speak in fragments about things that made the senior officials in the room exchange worried glances. He talked about documents buried in his apartment, about contacts he'd maintained with other, officially dead, operatives, about ongoing threats that the government didn't know existed. "There are others," he whispered, gripping Trump's hand with surprising strength. "Others like me. Still out there. Still watching. Still protecting secrets that could destroy everything." National Security Advisor O'Brien stepped forward. "Thomas, we need you to tell us about these others. Where are they? What secrets are they protecting?" Over the next hour, as Thomas's condition stabilized, he revealed the existence of a network of operatives who had been declared dead but continued to serve American interests from the shadows. Men and women who had volunteered for missions so classified that their survival had to be erased from official records. He spoke of Sarah Chun, not the doctor, but a CIA operative who had supposedly died in Beirut in 1983 but was actually running assets in Tehran. He described Marcus Webb, again, not the Pentagon security guard, but a Delta Force operator who had died in Somalia but continued to operate in Africa under deep cover. "We're the ghosts," Thomas explained, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. "The ones who volunteered to never exist again. But we're still here, still serving, still protecting America from threats you can't acknowledge. The implications were staggering. For decades, the United States had maintained a network of dead operatives who continued to serve without recognition, without support, without any official acknowledgement of their existence. Trump listened to every word, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. Finally, he turned to his advisors. I want a full briefing on this network. I want to know who they are, where they are, and what they need. These people have sacrificed everything for this country, and we're going to make sure they're taken care of. But Thomas wasn't finished. He described missions that were still ongoing, threats that were still active, and secrets that were still being protected by people who officially didn't exist. The warehouse in Baltimore, he said, his eyes intense despite his medical condition. Pier 47. There's a man there named Joseph Chun. He's been guarding something for 40 years. Something that could start World War III if it falls into the wrong hands. Agent Reynolds was already on his phone, coordinating with federal agencies to investigate Thomas's claims. Within hours, teams would be dispatched to locations across the country to verify the existence of operatives who had been presumed dead for decades. As the day progressed, Thomas Mitchell's room became the nerve center of one of the most significant intelligence operations in American history. Phone calls were made to officials who thought they had clearance for everything, only to discover there were levels of classification they'd never imagined. The story that emerged was staggering in its scope. Since the 1960s, the United States had maintained a program of existential deniability, operations so sensitive that the operatives involved agreed to be declared dead rather than risk exposure. These men and women had continued to serve, invisible and unacknowledged, protecting American interests in ways that could never be revealed. Dr. Chin found herself in the middle of a medical mystery that was simultaneously a national security revelation. As she continued to treat Thomas, she discovered that his remarkable recovery wasn't just due to his fighting spirit. It was the result of experimental medical procedures he'd undergone decades ago, treatments that had enhanced his body's ability to heal and survive. The drugs in his system, she explained to Agent Reynolds, they're not just performance enhancers. They're life extension compounds. His cellular regeneration rate is approximately 30% higher than normal for his age. Someone modified his biology to make him more survivable. The revelation added another layer to an already complex situation. Not only had the government created a network of dead operatives, but they had also conducted medical experiments to enhance their survival capabilities. 2 weeks later, Thomas Mitchell was discharged from Walter Reed, but his quiet life as a Pentagon janitor was over forever. The declassification of his existence had triggered a cascade of revelations that would reshape American intelligence operations for years to come. The Medal of Honor ceremony took place on a cold November morning in the East Room of the White House. Thomas stood at attention as President Trump placed the medal around his neck, but the ceremony was just the beginning of his new mission. Thomas, Trump said as the cameras clicked, I'm appointing you as Special Advisor for Classified Personnel Recovery. Your job is to find the others, the ghosts who are still out there serving this country. Bring them home. Give them the recognition they deserve. In the months that followed, Thomas Mitchell would lead an operation that brought 47 dead operatives back into official existence. Each had been protecting secrets that spanned decades of American foreign policy. Each had volunteered to disappear rather than risk exposure of classified operations. The warehouse in Baltimore yielded a stockpile of Soviet nuclear materials that had been secretly acquired during the Cold War. The operative guarding it, Joseph Chun, had been dead since 1979 but had continued to maintain security at the facility for 4 decades. Sarah Chun, the real one, was extracted from Tehran after 38 years of deep cover operations. Her intelligence had prevented multiple terrorist attacks on American soil, operations that could never be acknowledged because they would have revealed her existence. Marcus Webb, the Somalia casualty, was running a network of assets across sub-Saharan Africa that had prevented the proliferation of weapons-grade uranium to terrorist organizations. Each revelation added to the growing understanding that America's security had been protected for decades by heroes whose sacrifices could never be acknowledged. Thomas Mitchell's apartment, when finally searched by federal agents, contained 40 years of intelligence reports that he had continued to file through dead drops and coded communications. His work as a Pentagon janitor hadn't been coincidental. He had been positioned to gather intelligence on foreign attempts to penetrate American defense systems. The cleaning cart he had pushed for 15 years contained sophisticated surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary supplies. The routes he had walked each morning were carefully planned to provide optimal coverage of sensitive areas where foreign operatives might attempt to gather intelligence. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery was a letter Thomas had written to be opened only upon his death. It contained the locations of dozens of weapons caches, safe houses, and communication systems maintained by the network of ghost operatives. Each site contained resources that could be activated in the event of a national emergency. As Trump read the letter, he realized that Thomas Mitchell and his fellow ghosts had created an entire shadow infrastructure designed to protect America from threats that traditional intelligence agencies couldn't even identify. "Mr. President," Thomas explained during one of their private meetings, "we're the fail-safe, the last line of defense. When everything else fails, when the government falls, when the military is compromised, we're still here, still fighting, still protecting the idea of America, even if America itself is gone." The network Thomas revealed would become one of the most closely guarded secrets in American history. Presidents would be briefed about the ghosts. New operatives would be recruited for missions so classified that their success would require their official death. And Thomas Mitchell, the janitor who had cleaned Pentagon floors for 15 years while guarding some of America's deepest secrets, would spend his remaining years ensuring that the next generation of ghosts would be ready to disappear when their country needed them to. Because sometimes the greatest service to your country is agreeing to never officially exist. Sometimes the highest honor is being forgotten by everyone except the people who matter most. And sometimes the most important victories are the ones that can never be celebrated, except in the quiet moments when a president shakes hands with a ghost and says simply, "Thank you for your service." Thomas Mitchell died peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning in 2023, at the age of 79. His funeral was attended by the President, the Secretary of Defense, and 46 people whose names appeared on no official guest list, but whose presence spoke to a brotherhood forged in the shadows of history. His grave in Arlington National Cemetery bears a simple inscription: Thomas J. Mitchell, Staff Sergeant, United States Army Medal of Honor. He chose to disappear so others could be free. But those who knew the truth understood that Thomas Mitchell had never really disappeared. He had simply become invisible, like the best soldiers always do, present when needed, unseen when not, and always ready to serve his country in ways that could never be acknowledged. The network he revealed continues to operate today, protecting American interests in ways that will never make headlines. New ghosts are recruited when necessary, agreeing to official death in service of missions that require existential deniability. And somewhere in the corridors of the Pentagon, a new janitor pushes a cleaning cart along routes that provide optimal surveillance coverage, gathering intelligence that will never be attributed to him, serving a country that will never officially acknowledge his existence. Because the work of protecting America never ends. It just becomes invisible, carried out by heroes whose greatest service is their willingness to be forgotten by everyone except the few who understand that some victories can only be achieved by those who agree to never officially exist.